Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, I'm going to be covering some tips and tricks to healing in solo shuffle, as this can be one of the most difficult things to do in PvP. It can be really tough to navigate what your teammates are going to do. The first and foremost thing you need to realize when you're healing melee DPS is that they are going to go in, and they are probably not going to go out. So you want to use powerful defensive cooldowns very early and very often. So I'm going to start this fight with Rapture, pretty much as like my 5th global cooldown after engaging with combat. I also like to play aggressive with melee DPS. You can see me positioning next to the Paladin. I'm looking to get a fear onto them as soon as possible. And as soon as I've found that fear, I'm going to pull back to the pillar. I'm monitoring my teammates. I see Blur active and I see Die by the Sword active. So we're not going to trinket and we are not going to use personal defensive cooldowns. You really want to get Omni CD so you can monitor this. If somebody is unresponding and they're getting really low, you're going to need an emergency save heal, which pretty much every healing class has. For me on Priest, it's going to be Trinket and Life Swap. Here, my Warrior is getting blasted, so we're going to use pain suppression. They're stun locked, they can't move, and they're limited on defensives, so we're going to try and assist them by using pain suppression. We're going for Mind Blast here. We're setting up damage with Mind Games out of that, and we're going to go for an Ultimate Penitence to avoid that Cyclone, completely immune in CC, and continuing to play aggressive with these melee DPS. You need to be able to flex your playstyle depending on the composition that you've got. The Shaman has been continually trying to hex me, and honestly, I could have done a better job of trying to Shadow Word Death this, but it leads into my next point. Don't trust your teammates to do anything when it comes to interrupts. You want to be if you have a way to avoid crowd control yourself, it is far better for you to use that avoidance than to trust that your teammates are going to interrupt something, because that crowd control landing could lose you the game. So do not trust teammates to land interrupts as a healer on crowd control effects. If you have your own ways, shape shifting, shadow word deathing, any sort of crowd control avoidance, you need to be kind of your own personally responsible for it, because yeah, they're like little kids in the ballroom, and they're doing weird stuff, and they're not paying any attention. Here we've got an Ellie Shaman and a Demon Hunter, so ranged and melee. So likely I'm going to play a little bit more passive than I did in the previous round, and just focus on keeping my Ellie alive and trying to maximize his damage and keeping him really healthy. We're going to start Purge the Wicked, Penance, and we're going to spread that Purge the Wicked as soon as possible. And again, I'm still using Rapture very early. You want to stay ahead of the damage in solo shuffle rather than falling behind. I can see that Blur is active from my Demon Hunter, so I'm more worried about my Shaman. I'm always monitoring these defensive cooldowns. If one of them is glowing, it means it's active. So here's Astral Shift for the Shaman. They have defensives. So even though I'm crowd controlled and he's low health, I will sit these until he gets to about 10%, and then I'll use my emergency save if that ends up happening, but it's unlikely to happen here. We're going for Mind Blast, big penance from those Radiance charges. We get feared up and we will. The reason that I will is because the Shaman is too far away to Tremor, so monitoring range on your allies. And again, sometimes you don't want to trust them. Maybe give them a second to drop Tremor, and if it's not coming down fast enough, just use your own crowd control breaker, because War Breaker was active here for the Warrior, and that's a scary amount of damage. I'd rather stay ahead of it than trust that my teammate is going to do something in solo shuffle with no voice comms, and they might not be paying attention, or they might just not see it. Here we're just blasting damage. We take the Balancer down pretty easily here onto the second round, but this was the major tip for this one, is pay attention to the utility of your teammates. Shamans have the ability to remove fear on their allies, but if you're monitoring some Shamans, they might not ever drop it. So if you've got your own way to avoid fear or get out of fear, monitor the situation and adapt accordingly. And just always make sure you've got that fail-safe heal in your pocket. It might be like a Nature Swiftness on a Shaman or a Druid. For Priest, it's a Life Swap. For Paladin, it might be like a Trinket Bop or a Lay on Hands or something. You want that emergency measure to be your last line of defense when somebody's getting down to like 10%. You want to save that in your back pocket. So these situations when you're calculating, like, is he going to tremor me? Do I need to use my own crowd control breaker? Are they going to use defensive cooldowns? Like right here, I'm solar beamed. Is my warrior going to use Die by the Sword? He's half health, right? So I'm a bit scared, but I'm just sitting on that Trinket Life Swap. If I need to do it, I'll do it if they don't respond. And I know that I've got that in a safety net as a major save. And that's what's making it a lot more comfortable and a lot easier for me to heal in these types of situations. Again, we're just going to Power Infusion. Generally, Power Infusion, it's better to amp up the damage of your melee DPS, especially when you're lower rated. I would say as you get higher rated, it's better to shift your damage amping cooldowns onto range DPS, but at lower rating, this warrior's guaranteed to get damage. There's not really anything that can stop him from doing damage, so Power Infusion on the warrior is going to give way more value. We've got this team kind of cornered and just taking a brutal amount of damage, so I'm just pumping out pressure. We go for Mass Dispel to remove off the Blessing of Protection, and I'm sorry, I was mistaken. He's Enhancement, not Elemental in this specific lobby. We're not going to have Mass Dispel for the Cyclone, unfortunately. And right here, we see Essence Break. This is a powerful cooldown from Demon Hunters, and you're going to see a lot of them. So that little purple, it looks like Sinister Strike dagger. when that's on somebody, they're going to go down. You need to use a defensive cooldown. They're going to go down. That is the scariest, most powerful moment. Here again, I'm solar beamed, but I'm trusting that this is enough. And as soon as it was like, you might die, I trinket life swap. So I've got that emergency heal, and I'm sitting crowd control until the last possible moment of greed, assuming that there are defensive cooldowns active. Otherwise, I might do it a little bit higher. Now we're in a position where we can get a Psychic Scream, because I think I realized that he uses enhancement. And with melee DPS, I like playing a little bit more aggressive and trying to keep the enemies on their back foot, depending on what they're playing with, if they got a caster and the like. Here we're just blasting out damage onto the Demon Hunter, just maximizing our atonement. We've got Ultimate Penitence. We're going to drop down a barrier. And here, look, Essence Break. That little purple dagger, look at how unhealable that is. That's through barrier and Ultimate Penitence. And I got him back to full health, but it took 2 major cooldowns that are like 3+ minutes to get him to recover. So that's the major cooldown when you're healing against Demon Hunters that you have to pay attention to, that you have to trade for, and you have to trade pretty much immediately. The next one is the Hunt, which was that blue icon. You can see that's why he's starting to spike. So I pulled the Shaman out back to the pillar. Some melee DPS will run away with you when you do that. Other ones won't. It's generally, if you're a melee DPS watching this video, if somebody life grips you or pulls you behind a pillar, they want you to run away for a moment, because look how stressful this is to heal through. It's Incarnation from the Boomkin. It's all of their cooldowns. I'm trying my best to just power heal through this, and sometimes it's just not going to happen, right? It may be wise, honestly, for me to make a macro that when I life grip, it like / yells retreat or something, like run with me. This is something that I'm just monitoring for my own gameplay that could have changed the outcome of that round, because if we had just ran away and reset for like even 5 seconds just to get people back to full health, we probably would have won in that position. So if you're an evoker, rescuing somebody behind a pillar, or a priest gripping somebody behind a pillar and you're trying to reposition them and tell them to run away, it's probably wise to make a macro that either says, danger, retreat, as a healer. And some people might not, acknowledge that either, but it's better than, not doing anything at all, because that just lost me a round, right? So now we're moving forward. We got a Boomkin on our team. Purge the Wicked, spread that with Penance onto as many targets as possible. It's going to give us a lot of atonement healing, and it's free Purge the Wicked applications when you penance the target with it. So it's really important to do as much as possible, because main problem for Disc Priest and Shuffle is going to be mana. You always want to be playing for mana and playing for the long game generally in Shuffle. Now we've got Rapture up. We're getting crowd controlled. Boomkin has Barkskin up, so I'm not using Pain Suppression. I'm letting that personal defensive kind of line things up. I've got Renews going on targets. We're going to Penance the Warrior, line of sight to avoid interrupts, and play at the pillar. And generally, if you want to play safe as a healer, you kind of play back, play at the pillar, play it safe. I've got a caster now. There's no need for me to really run on top of them and try and play aggressive. I just want to try and keep my teammates as healthy as possible. Here, we dip below half health. I'm going to use a Pain Suppression onto the Balance Druid. Still sitting on that life swap, and there's that Essence Break, that purple little dagger. So we grip the Boomkin out, and he's able to escape back behind the pillar. We go for a Mind Blast Ultimate Penance to try and blast down the Demon Hunter. I thought he was going to chase the Boomkin into the room. Unfortunately, he was smart and actually ducked around the corner and avoided it. Here, my Boomkin is stunned. Generally, when you've got cooldowns that are placed on the ground as a healer, right? So like this barrier here that the Boomkin is in, it's better to wait until the person is stunned. This way they can't move out of it, right? Because a lot of people will just run out of Earthen Wall Totem, they'll run out of barrier, but when they're stunned, they can't move their character. So if you're really worried about something like a Boomkin who kites a lot, or a mage or something like that, you can just wait for them to be stunned and then drop that cooldown down. That way they've used all their kiting, they've avoided damage, and then you can reduce the damage during the stun, would be my best kind of recommendation when you're healing in these situations and you have those types of cooldowns. We used Rapture early, so we can get Rapture off cooldown right here. That's another tip as a healer. The lower your cooldown is, so like 1.5 minutes and lower, the sooner you want to use it in the game, because the more likely you're going to get to use it twice, and it's just giving you way more value to use cooldowns like that. And look how stable we are now. We're in such a great spot that I can actually just focus on doing damage. I've almost taken down the Demon Hunter entirely by myself. I can push in now, and I can get a triple fear onto the whole team. Everyone's basically dying. I'm keeping my team completely healthy and completely topped off. We get a fear now onto the Paladin, and we're just finishing off the Shaman with a Penance Shot over Death. And it put me in a position where I could just play really aggressive. So get value from your cooldowns. I'd say even if it's 2 minutes or less, you want to get that on CD as soon as possible. If you have anything above 3 minutes, 3 and above, those are like your emergency cooldowns. Those are like your last line of defense, because you're probably only getting them once in the game. So you want them to have the most impact in the match. It's not about efficiency, it's about impact. So something like Ultimate Penitence, you'd want to use that to, get somebody topped off because you got nothing left, or maybe finish off a target because they've used all their defensives about a minute and a half into a round. But you don't really want to use them early because you're not going to see them twice. So if it doesn't get value or it doesn't get impact, it's going to be, not a great trade. So we're moving in again. We've got Boomkin and Handsome Shaman, not really the best composition. We're just going to focus on defense, stay in the back, focus on maximum healing output. So on presets going to be Atonement, as we're going to use Mind Blast and Penance very early, Feather Sprinting over, still kind of staying out of range. I don't want to get AoE CC'd. I want to force them to use mobility to get to me and then get back to the target they want to attack. That's the best way to heal range DPS against melee. We're going to grip the Boomkin away from that Essence Break, that purple dagger. You can see Rapture, even Rapture is not really enough to deal with it. Even with a fully charged Penance, we barely get the Shaman back to 80%, but we do manage to make it through without using Astral Shift, which is, a better position. We get Cyclones on the Demon Hunter. I'm still just spamming Smites. Pally's running at me, so I'm going to use Fade. Again, anytime somebody's moving towards you, they're probably going to crowd control you, and that's why you want to heal from far away so you can see them running at you. And if you have any avoidance tools like a Greater Fade or Shadow Death, that's when you're going to want to use it. I see a Soybean on the Paladin, so I go for Ultimate Penitence, flying myself up into the air, immunity CC, and just dumping down a bunch of damage. It felt like good value. There was lots of targets in line of sight. We had crowd control on the healer. And it forced the darkness from the Demon Hunter in this position. We still got one more charge of Pain Suppression after we've just used one here, and you can see I use it immediately. As soon as I see that little purple dagger from a Demon Hunter, I'm using a defensive cooldown. I'm not messing with that. I know you can crit him for 400,000 damage. I'm reducing that as soon as possible. Elysian Decree, that blue circle on the ground. Our Shaman uses Wall, and our Boomkin uses Bark Skin. So that's a big burst of damage, but I see that my teammates have responded, so I don't really want to overlap with that. I want to extend as many cooldowns as I can in a chain next to each other to keep the game going as long as possible while trying to focus on my mana retention. Now it's Warbreaker, so this is big damage from the warrior right here with this 5 seconds left, and look at that, it's massive damage. I have to drop a barrier. Honestly, it would have been better to barrier. The reason is because they were hitting 2 targets with sweeping strikes than it was to use pain suppression on 1 target and then have to barrier on top of them anyways. I could likely still have a pain suppression right now if I used barrier instead. Again, it can be tough because they might run out of barrier. They weren't stunned. Here we're focusing damage onto the Demon Hunter. My teammates are top. Paladin's bubbling in the back. We might be able to take him down. We get another walk from him. Now I'm getting shields back out, just focusing on getting the team back to full health before the defensives fall. I've got my trinket. I've got my life swap. I've got power infusion, so we're going to push in, power infusion the Shaman, get in on top of the Paladin. They're pretty much out of cooldowns. Push in, get a triple fear, keep my dots up. I see damage coming in onto the Balance Druid, try and keep them topped up with the Radiances, but this Paladin is just going to end up getting bopped by the Shaman, but not the good kind of bop. In this position, we're actually able to take the round here. So you can see, when you see Cleave and AoE damage, barrier gets value. Stress points for that are if the targets aren't stunned and they're targets that like to kite, they might just run out of it. Sometimes you can position near your barrier and grip people back into it. That is something, but as a Shaman, you're going to have to move the totem around, hope that they see it. Getting ping macros and yell macros are definitely going to be a lot better for those types of situations. But now we're moving to the final round. We got Boomkin, we got Demon Hunter. We're going to take all the lessons that we've learned previously. Anything that's 2 minutes or less, we want to be using very early into the start of the round, so that we're going to get to see 2 of it in a game. Anything that's 3+ minutes, we're going to want to use a little bit later into the game after defensives or offensives have faded for emergency situations and try and get the most impact from them. Starting 40 yards away, going for Mind Blast, Penance, spreading that Purge of Wicked in a good position to just max out damage. Power Infusion and Rapture, those are the 2-minute cooldowns or less for Disc Priest, so I'm tossing those out immediately. We get Feared. We don't have any other way to break it except our Will of Forsaken, and I generally don't want to sit crowd control against a melee cleave with a Boomkin. It's just going to be pretty risky, and I don't really want my Boomkin to be sitting in bear form and perma defensive. So again, we're just focusing on damage, staying in the back line, using Atonement. Here we're going to go for Ultimate Penitence. Our Boomkin has no Bark Skin. They're in a good position. I've got Mind Blast debuff up, which means the Shaman's going to take huge amounts of damage from it, and we can start to pick him back up. Trying to MD off the bop here. He gets Cyclone, so we're not going to go for it anyways. Sharpened Blade is up, so we're going to use Pain Suppression. That's going to reduce healing. We're going to grip the Boomkin in the room so he can run. Demon Hunter uses Blur, so I don't need to worry about the Demon Hunter. He dodges all of their attacks from melee with this pretty much. So anytime he sees defensive active, I'm paying attention to this side. They're both fine. Get the shields back up, get renews up, start doing damage. Paladin got crowd controlled. Teammates are topped, so I can focus on doing damage. Always trying to squeeze in as much damage as possible. That forces Burrow from the Shaman. We're going to immediately start penencing the warrior and swapping damage onto him. You just want to always be maxing your globals. And here they're getting cleaved. So I dropped a barrier, and you can see they ran out of it. And they're trying their best to get back into it. They get back into the barrier, but barrier here against the warrior was really good because warriors do 2 target cleave damage with sweeping strikes. And that barrier got a lot more value than, in the last round where I pain supped first. Here, emergency measure CD, he dipped below 20%. Rather than trying to greed it with pain suppression, I'm just going to use life swap. When I life swap, I desperate prayer. Usually if I have a Hellstone, I'll use Hellstone as well, because most of the time people will swap to you, and you got to get that emergency heal back up. Because we use Rapture early, guess what's back up right when we're being stressed? Rapture is now available again. This is going to allow us to continue to spam out big shields, get instant flash of light procs, and keep my teammates pretty healthy. We get hexed here. It does get dispelled by the boomkin. Sometimes it's good to check if your allies are actually running decers, because a lot of players won't. So again, in that situation, I should have Shadow or Death. We're powering damage onto the Shaman. Fell Barrage actually ends up killing him through wall, and that's why I'm saying sometimes even with major defensive cooldowns, you're gonna have to use that emergency heal. So just always monitoring their health. As soon as they get below 20, like, that's emergency heal mode. But that's it for me in this one. I hope that these tips for healing help you out and help you out with your climb. Other than that, if you like the video, thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.